depression, biological anxiety, those things are very, very real. It's easy to be dismissive. Oh, get over it or whatever. But the chemicals that are flooding your brain that are happening is maybe a trigger from something else in childhood or a memory that's been repressed that is now being activated. These things are real. So having patience for people who are really going through things and just listening. That's the beauty of things like this with the podcast. It's like being able to offer up your story and being able to offer up a potential healing for somebody. If we could just all do more of that all day, we can all realize that we're just part of this human belonging and we can move everybody forward.
Hello there, amazing humans, and welcome to episode number 308 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. Have you ever met someone who's gone through trauma? Of course you have. Have you gone through trauma? I'm going to assert you probably have, right? Like, welcome to the human experience. And this idea of trauma has become kind of trendy lately, right? But there's so much that's important inside of it. There's so much for us to understand about each other. There's so much for us to understand about how we work through things ourselves, what we think happens versus what actually happens. What do we do with that? What's the difference? These questions are so important. And at a time when the world feels pretty dang tumultuous, right? Like, it feels a little odd out there. People are harsh with each other. People are judging each other. They don't even know each other. And we assume we know everything about everyone we come into contact with based on where they live or how they voted or who they hang out with, right? And what would happen in this world? What would be possible? Just sort of to play with this idea of like, what would be possible if we started to get really curious instead? Just hanging out with that question without changing anything, what would be possible? You know, today's guest, Dr. Kirsten Viola Harrison, is really out to open up this conversation for us and have us understand what it looks like to actually be empathetic. But she's also a doctor. She comes at this with the lens of science, psychology, and an understanding of what happens to human beings during trauma, and then how we end up showing up in life. And this is going to be a really interesting episode for you to listen to if, say, you love someone who happens to be neurodivergent, if you yourself have gone through trauma. Hi, raise his hand. Sarah, raising hand, right? Like, I will raise my hand for that, right? If you've watched someone else go through trauma, if you suspect someone you love has gone through trauma, this is going to be a conversation that is really going to change the way that you start to interact with other people and hopefully the way that you start to treat yourself, because it's so important that we understand the mechanisms at work in our human interactions, because we're missing a lot. And we're kind of at this gorgeous fork in the road as humans, where we can choose to continue to dismiss what we're seeing, continue to ignore what's happening, or we can dive in deeper and start to learn and create something pretty amazing between each other. Dr. Kirsten Viola Harrison is a trauma psychologist, author, and founder of Soulwise Solutions. For over 35 years, she has helped individuals navigate profound psychological and spiritual transitions, including those living with complex PTSD, CPTSD, dissociative identity disorder, which she defines during this episode, schizophrenia, and near-death experiences. Her integrative approach blends clinical expertise with compassionate soul work to support true, lasting healing. She's the co-author of Shauna, the story of a homeless intersex woman who inspired a community. And this is a true account of Shauna Smith, an intersex woman with schizophrenia whose life defies stigma and inspires change. And together, they advocate for an end to outdated medical practice and a future rooted in dignity and inclusion. You guys, if you have started to lose hope in humanity, I know that's kind of a big statement for me to say, but you know what I'm talking about. If you've started to wonder if we're all going to make it, like, is this society going to hold together? Are we going to come back home to the gorgeous, giving, loving humans that we all know we actually are? Are we going to actually turn to our highest selves? Are we going to turn to the better angels of our nature? If you've been starting to question that, this is the episode for you to listen to. So pop in those earphones and let's get to it. Kirsten, welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast. I got to tell you, I'm like flying out of my seat right now. This is going to be a really fun conversation. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I love the energy already, just the brightness. This is going to be really fun.
Oh, so good. So good. So I know we are going to be talking about keeping the faith. We are going to be talking about how you never know when your story is going to dramatically shift for the good. We're going to be talking about the power of trauma. There's so much that we want to cover. And I'm really, really excited for this. I just have this really strong impression this is a message people need right now. So I can't
Yeah.
wait to dive in. But before we do, I have a very
Yeah.
important question to ask you.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that is, out of all of the amazing things that you could have done as Dr. Harrison in your life, right? All the amazing things you could have done with your life. Why is this what you've chosen to do with your one and only life on planet Earth?
I think we'll go back to childhood on this one, where my parents they're from Germany and England, and had, as children, gone through the war, World War II. And just so much of that impacted their choice, especially my dad, his choice of literature to start reading with me when I was a young child. Your Anne Franks, your Uncle Tom Cabins, all of the things about empathy, but also these extreme injustices that happen to humans. So that was like the beginning. And then I had a brother who was pretty sickly when I was younger. And it was one of those things where they just made me much more compassionate. And why don't you take care of things while we bring him to the hospital again? And then I was that kid on the playground. If anybody was a little straggler at lunchtime, I was like, come on, join the group. Come on, play with us. So I think it was just in my empathic nature to choose the path that I did. But I will say the reason that I really got into it, hooking into those early seeds in high school, I went on a date. I was at a nice little Midwestern private high school, and I went on a date with a guy from the high school. And unbeknownst to me, he had been adopted from an orphanage. And in South America, he'd spent the first 5 years there, 5 years in an orphanage. And so he had run away to the streets a few times. So I ended up being in a 16-year relationship with him, but it started with me not understanding post-traumatic stress. What were these struggles he was showing? And my friends were talking about our cheerleading camp that weekend. And then meanwhile, he's having really serious issues with trauma. So it made me very intrigued to learn more about psychology. I felt like the more I learned, the more I could help him. And that was true. And then I just dove in experientially. And then fast forward a couple years, in my early 20s, my brother, that one that had a lot of sickly issues, did pass away, but it was in an accident. And it was it was horrible. So it was one of those things, though, where it's sink or swim. And so I started going to a lot of the trauma conferences, but also to near death conferences. And I was enraptured and fascinated by people's accounts of near death experiences. And I did everything I could. We didn't have the internet back in the 80s. I did everything I could to try to learn and study and hear from firsthand accounts of near death experiences. And consequently, that has been the guiding light and the journey of hope that has kept me in this field for so long. That's the backstory.
Oh my gosh. I should have known, right? I should have known there'd be some incredible story. Like it just, when we as humans go through such intense experiences, it's almost like we can't not end up building careers around. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, so true. Yes. So many people who've had maybe a sibling passive of leukemia when they were younger ended up becoming the best oncologists. It is part of, it's these little signposts along the way that maybe this is what we were chosen to do or we chose to do before we even came down. So that's starting to become my belief.
I really love that perspective. I've had a lot of people start to say that lately. I think it's, I want to use the word sweet, and I don't mean to be diminishing at all, but it's so tender, like it's so touching that.
Well, it also gives a sense of control, because a lot of people have had such difficult lives that it's, but if I chose to have certain struggles, it starts to give them a little bit more of a sense of mastery. So there is some beauty to that in that way too.
Yeah, no, I can really get that, because I think there are a lot of hidden costs to trauma. There's so much, and feeling out of control is obviously one of them, but I know you really dive into all the hidden costs that we have that are just buried inside trauma. Can you like expand on that a little bit for us? I know there are people listening. I just know there are people listening who've been through, please welcome to the human race, right? Like we've all been through something, right? Oh my gosh. Yeah. But like, what are these hidden costs of trauma? What can we be aware of as humans?
So ultimately, I always look for the hidden gems and the hidden strengths and the things, but the costs are in this world where we have to overly function and we have to put our executive functioning on all the time. The stuff that kind of eats away little by little at the functioning or the purposeful striving, or maybe somebody who's had trauma might have a part inside that's extremely functional on the outside, but then maybe their relationships are really faltering or they're having struggles in other domains. And that is a really very serious and needs to be addressed issue, because kids these days, a lot of times they're over medicated, they're acting out, they're impulsive in school, yet there might be things going on at home that don't necessarily catch the eye of the school environment. And so medication is just masking some of these symptoms. Some more of the hidden costs would be just the ability to fully, what Freud used to say, to be able to have all your psychic energy available so that you can work and play. And it's so that you can have good, you can have all your good love relationships and you can actually just enjoy life. But there is also so much gift and treasure in the trauma, in the post-traumatic growth and striving and thriving, because so many have touched the edges of what we would call sanity, have touched the edges and gone a little beyond and have gone to this like much greater order that is really beautiful. And they teach us how we can get through certain things. And I think COVID highlighted that a lot, where some people were really struggling with this new normal, yet people had a lot of trauma, had a sort of an adaptive, they might initially have been thrown off track again and re-traumatized, but then they had a lot of built-in adaptation and they had a lot of built-in survival that helped then guide the rest of us to, okay, new normal. Restaurants are now going to go in the street and have patio service. Like, those are adaptations that people got to quicker, sometimes when they'd had so much else that they'd had to learn and grow those muscles early.
I love this. Looking at all of the ways that, I think, if I could sum that up, I'm going to try. Heaven knows I may not do the best job, but looking at all of the, I love that you use the word adaptations, because that can go either way, right? There could be a positive adaptation and there could be like a compensation, or I know for myself, I just have even called myself, given my own upbringing, like adaptable. I'm like really adaptable. Like I can read a room in 2 seconds, and that's a strength I've had from it. But boy, did it come from not a great experience, right? So it's, I love that word.
So what you just touched on is so beautiful. And what I mentioned with my high school sweetheart, he had an uncanny ability to read people and read emotions, because when he lived on the street, he had to know, is this person going to hurt me? Is this person going to give me food? And so just a quick thing in the eyes, he used to tell me that it was like a movie film slowing down in frames. And so he could break everything apart in a way that was really a survival gift. But it was harder in school, because when he would dissociate, or when he would, what teachers would think he was just zoning out, he couldn't quite translate that to the more linear expectations in the classroom. So it all also depends on the phase of life and the expectations in a certain kind of career. He ended up becoming a producer, and his eye, his cinematography eye, his ability to put everything together was such an ability that he got from the trauma living on the streets as a young child. So it's, you never know. Relationally, it was a real struggle sometimes with us because of so much distrust and so much trauma. So it's just like everything else in life, it's a balance. You try to come to some sort of homeostasis through all the different experiences and the different healings. And I think some people can really forge through and turn out like pretty triumphant.
We know the human race is so resilient, right? Like we know we're resilient, but boy, it does not feel that way sometimes, does it? When you're in it?
I know, it's so true.
It's just really rough.
That's the thing, is remembering perspective too, because some things are very real. Depression, biological anxiety, those things are very, very real. And it's easy to be dismissive. Oh, get over it or whatever. But the chemicals that are flooding your brain that are happening is maybe a trigger from something else in childhood, or a memory that's been repressed that is now being activated. These things are real. So having patience for people who are really going through things and just listening. That's the beauty of things like this with the podcast. It's like being able to offer up your story and being able to offer up a potential healing for somebody. If we could just all do more of that all day, we can all realize that we're just part of this human belonging, and we can move everybody forward.
I want to cry. Yes. I want to cry. That is, I'm like, and there's life's mission right there. Because it just, there's so much right now, just sort of like take this into where we are as a world right now, right? There's so
Yes.
much judgment and so much harshness as
Yes.
opposed to curiosity and
Mhm.
leading with empathy and wanting to
Yes.
understand. Did you ever watch Ted Lasso?
I did. I love Ted
Sequitur.
Lasso.
I'm sorry, that was like out of the blue, but I was just remembering. Okay, for anybody listening, if you didn't see Ted Lasso, go see Ted Lasso. It's so good. But there's
Yeah.
a scene where he's playing darts,
Yes.
and he
Yes.
puts in a really big wager on these darts,
Yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
teaching at the same time the
Mhm.
person he's up against that I
Yes.
know you
Yeah.
judged me as an idiot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you'd actually asked me, and if you'd actually been curious, you would know I
Yes.
played darts my entire childhood. And I'm actually
Yes.
not right-handed, I'm left-handed. And he just
Yes.
starts nailing this thing. And it's,
Yeah.
oh my God, it was a beautiful
Yeah.
illustration of that. But this
Yeah.
idea that instead of being judgmental, could we instead be curious? And what
Yes.
would be possible in the world if we did?
And that is a beautiful example and a beautiful spin on that exact moment, because the reality is we don't take enough time to be curious. I remember I worked in an inpatient unit that was all for what we used to call multiple personality disorder. It
Okay.
was in LA. Now we call it DID. And the psychiatrist in charge used to say, I don't understand. How come XYZ or whatever, or something would, a client would be having an abreaction somewhere and then be hiding under a table in a child part. And I'd be like, yeah, it's 6 o'clock. That sort of makes sense or whatever. And he'd be like, how do you know this? And I'm like, I listen, I open myself up to just sitting with the person and having a little chocolate milk with her and her kid part and saying, what's going on for you right now? And she'd be like, at dinner time was usually when I was getting abused. So I get really scared. Of course, 6 o'clock or whatever. That's an example. And so it really starts with just, opening your heart.
Yeah.
Obviously, safety and creating safety is easier for some people to do. But the reality is, if you just slow down a little bit and offer up that moment of compassion, you don't have any idea where that could take you. And in fact, in longevity studies, when they talk about the importance of social connections as
Mhm.
being part of the blue zone research,
Yeah.
a huge part of that is not only does our nervous system calm a little bit when we're hanging out with people and we're getting our minds on other things, but you might have that friend in the corner that said, hey, I had this great cardiologist in case you ever need it. And oh, this other person's saying, I just tried this. And that's part of it. It's
Mhm.
like you never know that, or that one little sentence that they said that just helped you then deal with your teenage child. It's
So
it's
true.
so vital.
It's
So
so true. And
yeah.
that, I think that tapestry of shared humanity,
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
really what we can weave
Yes.
together to be a really strong, beautiful society. Yeah. Love
Absolutely.
that. Wait, I
And
just want to take
educating
you
ourselves
100%. Yeah.
so that we can learn if somebody says something, oh, I think I read something about that, or I listened to a podcast about that. And then you can even offer up more wisdom.
So true. And then to teach is
Mhm.
how we all really cement our own learnings, right? I mean, it's just
True,
so beautiful.
true.
So I just wanted to take you back. You mentioned DID, not multiple personality disorder. I don't know what DID
Mhm.
is. Can you share what that is and what that means and
So,
why it was changed?
okay, so DID is dissociative identity disorder. And I think
Okay.
that they thought the nomenclature sounded a little bit easier for people to handle because, again, again, in the 80s, it was really hard for people to get credibility if they were a scientist or a practitioner, psychiatrist, and then yet you're giving validation to these people who say they have satanic ritual abuse or all these parts. So the 80s was a very tumultuous period for trauma treatment and studies. However, it was also incredible because we learned so much from the stories of the people who had been through things. And we
Mm,
also learned that sometimes the stories had to be a little bit extra fantastical to grab people's attention or to grab the psychiatrist's attention. But in reality, maybe it was more,
subtle.
somebody, yeah, exactly, or something in the family that was just way too buried in consciousness to handle. And so when people have very, very severe childhood trauma, depending on the severity, often there's a split there's like an amnestic barrier between the behavior, the affect, which is the feeling, the sensation, and the knowledge of it. And so in a normal situation, we would remember an event with all of those four things put together. But in severe trauma, you might be able to remember the noise, but not the knowledge of what happened. Or you
Oh,
might
wow.
feel something, but don't remember the behavior that happened or that you took. It's an adaptive mechanism that our brains do for us, that our souls and spirits do, to be able to not have to handle the enormity or the intensity of the full event. And it's a
Ugh.
blessing. It's honestly a
Right.
blessing.
It's
Yeah,
such a protective mechanism. Could
exactly.
you say those
Yeah.
four things again?
Uh-huh. So it's called BASC. So it's behavior, affect, sensation, and knowledge.
Got it. Okay. Okay. And that
And
for in a healthy environment where someone feels
yes,
safe, all four of those will be part of a memory.
yes. So
Okay.
back in the day, there was a guy named Bennett Braun, Dr. Braun, and he's done a lot of consciousness research, which I love because there's a natural segue when you're dealing with people, a population who've been so traumatized and they've got this like extra like awareness of things. It's
Mm,
very fascinating to then delve into where is the body, where is consciousness, when they're out of body, what's going on here? And that formed the basis of a lot of my dissertation because
mm.
I wanted to compare that to people who had near death experiences and when they left the body. There's so much that is adaptive in early traumatic like adaptation. However, the difficulty is, again, later in life, people expect you to integrate your behavior, your affect, your sensation, and your knowledge. And sometimes they just can't. And so that's where the therapy work is.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So the
Mm-hmm.
expectation changes as we age, regardless of how we actually were raised.
Ah, yes,
And that's when we
yes,
start to hit up against these societal walls of what is going on here. And that's when we can really dive into it. So I
yes,
just I have a question. I have
yeah.
a feeling someone's asking somewhere, or maybe it's just me. I don't know. If someone's listening right now and they're thinking, okay, I'm recognizing this in myself, I'm seeing what's happening here.
Uh-huh.
How would they know that? And what could they do about it?
Okay, so it wouldn't be super overt. It's the same thing when I was doing one of the stepkids that I raised along the way had special needs and she was neurodivergent and she read energy really well. And so talking to her in a linear manner wasn't going to get across as much if I would say something that was in the feeling realm that had something to do with an energetic feel good something. And if I related it to Elsa from Frozen, like somehow that's when she made the connection. So I
Got it.
feel like with people with a lot of severe trauma, they are highly adaptive in life. There will be parts out functioning like crazy, but what might happen is you might find them then full grown, maybe 70 years old, but then sitting like cross-legged in a bookstore at Barnes and Nobles in the kids section and laughing like a little child maybe. And that would be like the extreme version. But again, these days it's a little more acceptable. People are like,
Mm,
okay, that's interesting.
yeah.
Whereas before people felt like they had to hide it in the shadows a little more. But it wouldn't be as overt as you might think it would be. It would just
Mm,
be maybe in a conversation with somebody, you get this strong energetic sense that instead of talking to your friend who's your age, that all of a sudden you feel energetically there's a little girl in pigtails in front of you. Like you feel the regression
wow.
to a younger part. And
Okay.
so it's just a subtle energetic shift. And oftentimes in relationships is where it comes up the most, like a husband or a wife or what might say, I'm noticing that every time we go to a theme park, this happens or whatever. And then there's some incredible therapies. Nowadays, we have a lot of somatic therapies, which have been incredible with trauma. Traditional talk therapy. I did a lot of work with horses. I'm scared of horses, but somebody who owned a ranch said, I would love to take your trauma therapy and put it together with the horses. And it was amazing the things that would come up when the horse would interact. And so there's so many out of the box kind of therapies. And you just have to start to realize that there's never one thing that's going to cure all. And there's also just such
Mm,
a plethora out there of therapies available that if one doesn't work, keep trying, go to the
yeah.
next one.
Yeah.
So,
I love that idea too of just being a little bit malleable in the healing process
yes,
as well. Like
yes,
there is not a pill to take here and then everything's fine. It's a kind of this constant work in progress.
yes,
Okay. And you
yeah.
said too, you said a minute ago something about consciousness
Mhm.
that I think is really
Uh-huh,
important. So where is
uh-huh.
it? How does it, what is this thing? And
Yeah.
then also I know you say that we can learn a lot from people who've had near death experiences. Are those two things connected, like where consciousness goes or what happens? Is that
Yes.
connected or is that completely different?
Okay, so one of the people that I worked really, he just passed away sadly in his early 90s, but his
Oh,
name was Dr. Ralph Allison. And he was the first to talk about he was considered the grandfather of the field with like multiple personalities. And
okay.
I don't know if you remember, there was a book called Sybil, and
I was
her,
just going to say, I'm thinking of
yeah,
Sybil. Yeah.
yeah. So her analyst
Yeah.
also, she was a grandmother of the field. And these were two very legitimate he was Stanford trained medical school practitioners who just saw so many interesting things in their
Mm,
client that they just couldn't explain. And so now it's getting a little more popular in internal family systems to honor a spiritual aspect. However, before that was not talked about. It was very pushback. Yet I just thought with my doctoral research, I was like, there's too many times that I hear them talking about how they left the body, they were in the hands of Jesus, or they were in the playground playing with their angel mommies, or there were just so many times that people would say, but I wasn't even there. I was looking at the body, but I was up. The angels kept me safe. And so I thought, okay, this is notable, whatever it means. Yeah, of course, you're having to go through, is that a psychological defense? Is it the brain doing something? Right. I started to feel like when I heard so many stories of near-death survivors who might have had maybe a cardiac event and resuscitated, or an accident and resuscitated, I was hearing the same thing, only with them, it was so apparent that it was like the soul. And so I was like, I think it's the same mechanism operating in both cases. Of course, I can't prove that. I interviewed enough people where I'm convinced, but I really believe that there's something about, and quantum physics would have a lot to say about this, something about consciousness. Non-locality. There's something that happens at the moment of deep surrender and at the moment of extreme trauma that is such a beautiful gift from God. It is or from the universe, let's say, that somehow protects us. At that moment, we're already somewhere else. And I feel like believing that, what is the harm in believing that? To me, that feels like, okay, it takes away a lot of fear. It takes away a lot of feeling of vulnerability. And are we flailing around by ourselves, or can we believe that something's holding us, watching us, caring for us? And it makes all the difference in therapy. It really does.
Yeah, I could see that really dissipating anger too. Like, where was everybody, or why me? Those feelings that we can have anytime something bad happens. It could really support with that as well. I can see that. Okay.
That goes into the life review part too. Like the people who've had near-death experiences in the life review, in a very quick moment. Again, nowadays people talk about this all the time and they have YouTubes, but back in the day, in the 80s, you had to go to the conferences to talk to the people who'd actually gone through it.
Yeah.
And so there were just so many things that you learn in your life review, and you learn about the purpose of why we're here. And you also feel everything from the perspective of the other person. So if you bullied a kid on the playground, in the life review, you're going to feel what it felt like from their perspective. And so it just breeds huge amounts of compassion. And also the whole notion that maybe we did plan our lives, maybe we did plan our challenges. And whether we can ever prove that in our lifetimes or not, if you just believe that, it does give you a little less anger. It gives you I went to a near-death conference once, and this woman had gone through so much childhood trauma. And I was like, gosh, you just seem so joyous. She was like 23 or something. And she said, well, yeah, that's because I was Genghis Khan in a last lifetime. So everything that happened just makes sense. And I was like, okay, maybe she was, but that totally works for her to go, well, I guess this is the flip-flop life. So how am I going to work my way through it? And you don't want someone to take on all of this burden of, shame, and that was my fault. No, but you want to be able to pick and choose the things that are going to give you strength and resilience and a meta kind of framework for what happened. And that can be so healing.
It's amazing. Gosh, like you said, I have so many questions that just popped up at once. Sorry, I had a moment of that one and that one. But in looking at that, really want to just say how much I appreciate your take on this, that it almost doesn't even matter if it's real, if it's supportive, and if it helps somebody get through something hard. I think that is important to state that, because I know I'm hearing like my son who's, no, that's just the brain. And and we've actually had this conversation where I'm like, and who cares? So what if it is? It's amazing. Either way, it's really incredible.
So I do love that. What I would love to talk with him about, though, is that I have spoken to so many neuroscientists and people that I don't believe, I had to cover that in my dissertation. I don't believe it's just the ketamine hypothesis or an anoxia or whatever. I don't believe that from what I've heard. And Eben Alexander is a great neurosurgeon who wrote about this. And when he became part of IANS, which is the International Association for Near-Death Studies, when he started coming to our meetings and conferences, and anyone can come, it's the most amazing, wonderful community of experiencers and professionals, lots of MDs, lots of cardiologists who've seen resuscitations firsthand. But either it's hard for me to dispute that. I feel like we really, really are experiencing something that is beyond the physical brain mechanisms. But as you said, I think it's really important. Okay, let me go back. in the 80s, there was something called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And they were trying to take all these people who were having all these memories of childhood abuse and say those are just false memories. They've been implanted by inscrutable therapists, and they tried to take away the veracity of what was happening to some of these people and their memories. It became clear. We started shifting our practice to the facts aren't as important as how you feel about the facts. Your body's telling you something happened. It may not be exactly how you remembered it. And in fact, a lot of kids were given substances and things when they were being abused. So they were going to have interesting scattered memories. And that was to make them not believable. So it really became less about, it's
right.
levels of horror.
Well, that makes total sense to me, though. That someone would think that through. Yes. Yeah. So apologies. Go ahead. Yeah.
So your body is remembering something. Your body is keeping the score, like Bessel van der Kolk says so beautifully. And the reality is something happened. Something threw you off the normal path. And it's not normal to wake up like in a total sweat and terror, like at certain times, or it's not, certain things are pointing to a certain kind of path and a certain reality that may have happened. And maybe it didn't, but let's work with what we have and see how you can get through that.
Because I was just going to say, if you feel like it did, we got to deal with that too. Like, it doesn't even matter.
Exactly.
I really get that. Yes. So the experience of what happened and the effect that has on a human being is actually where we want to spend the time.
And yes, really, and that goes back to your first question, even leading into the whole thing about like the effects of trauma that are more covert, or the things that we don't always recognize as something that is maybe a buried trauma or whatever. So again, it really is all about holding space, witnessing, trying to join in a compassionate manner. So whatever that is, that person is working through, you can help them get through. And it's no different from, there are a lot of teens that have been assaulted, sadly, under these date rape drugs or things. And one of the hardest things for them in therapy is they don't remember the event. They don't remember exactly what happens. All they know is that it happened. They have evidence on their clothing, whatever. And it's so hard for them because they say, but I don't remember. So how am I ever going to process it? Let's process it in all sorts of different ways. Let's do energetic work. Let's do somatic work. Somehow it's going to come out, and then we can deal with it. We can deal with the healing and reframe it all.
Yeah. I love that. It just reminded me, I was recently having a conversation with my boyfriend about, he's like, everybody's broken. I was like, let's reframe that. I was like, how about we're not broken? How about we're all healing? He was like, oh my God, I love that. And I think it's so important for us to live in that world of we can heal stuff. And it's like, oh my God, of course we can, right? And life is going to bump into us and knock stuff around, but we can heal. We are so freaking resilient. And I really appreciate you reframing it like that.
And let's take it one step further. We are badasses because we are living our mission that we maybe had a hand in designing somewhere in quantum physics world, that maybe we were like, last time the life this time I kind of want to experience this, maybe. And if that's the case, it does give you a sense of, okay, now I got these pieces like a big old puzzle. Let's see where we can make these things fit and what could we create with that.
It's so cool. So cool. Okay. God, we could talk about this all day. I'm not even joking. I'm like, add another thing. All right. But I do want to get to something really important, which is through all of this trauma, through all of the things that every single human being is going to experience. Of course, there's varying degrees, of course, right?
Yes.
But we're all going to experience some sort of trauma. That's like the human experience. So you have a story with Shauna that I know is, I want to use the word special. I don't use that word very often, but it's like this gorgeous illustration of what we can do with our own stories. Can you talk a little bit about that and share Shauna's story with us?
Absolutely. So that's the person that we're referring to. And if you're on video at all, that it's on the poster behind me. And so Shauna she has more of a brain-based disorder, and I've never been her therapist, but I've been in very close contact with her for 10 years. And I would say she suffers from more of a dissociative schizophrenia, which the schizophrenia part is much more brain-based than hugely relationally traumatic as a child type of thing. So she slept on cardboard for 8 years. She has a 4-year college degree. She's a PE teacher and just started falling through the cracks. Mental illness definitely started having an impact on her life. And she was born we used to call hermaphrodite, which is bi anatomy, or intersex now is how they refer to it. So she's never even been able to depend on the solid ground of knowing what her biological sex. So she's exactly.
Yeah.
And so her life has been confusing for her. And long story short, I started to get to know her because my ex-husband was a tennis pro, global travel with tennis, and had long dreadlocks and was Trinidadian American. And Shauna was this very tall, 6'5" African American muscular person who hung out at the tennis courts. And so I was like, hey, you guys didn't have a really great match someday. And about a month went by. We had just moved to La Jolla with our kids. And about a month went by, and all of a sudden, Sean was now Shauna with a blonde wig and like a pink bikini top, I remember, and a little skirt. And I was like, okay, this is definitely interesting. I want to know what's going on. So I went to the Starbucks inside the grocery store and I brought her a little drink, and she was just hanging out. And we just started striking up conversation. So eventually I started bringing my clothes from my closet to give her clothes because I realized she didn't have maybe gainful employment. She seemed like she had some struggles aside from the schizophrenia became pretty obvious to me pretty quickly. However, she had befriended people in La Jolla for 30 years. She was always on the basketball court. Everybody absolutely loved her optimism and her joy. So one day, I wrote about it in the book. I can't remember why I went to the grocery store at 11 o'clock at night in a pouring rain downpour, but I did. Probably dog food or something. I can't remember.
Something important, and clearly. Yes.
Yeah, something important. And or maybe a break from arguing kids. I don't know. But she was there and she was freezing. It was pouring rain. She's in her little bikini thing and she's just shivering. And all of a sudden it was like light bulb moment. Oh my gosh, she doesn't have housing. That never occurred to me. And so I was like, Shauna, do you need a place to stay? Do you need a hotel or something for the night? She was like, oh, yes, ma'am. Bless. Thank you so much. And whatever. So we got her in the hotel. After that, I got into the parking lot back in my car and I just started crying. And I called the local paper and left a long message. And I said, we have to do something. This is not right. There's a very wonderful, exuberant member of the community and she's struggling. GoFundMe had just started happening. And so I was like, can we start a GoFundMe? Could you do that in the paper? And so the editor, wonderful, brought us in. And yes, she did. The community showed up really well for her, $11,000 plus an angel investor who donated another 15.
That's
so
gorgeous.
For 2 years, so it was like immediate, like I had her in these little hotels and then an apartment. So from that first night, she was never back on the street. Now, fast forward 10 years, she's never been back on the street in 10 years. So after the second year, it was more up to me to kind of like take care of her expenses. So then I started panicking, thinking, how am I going to stay in this? So I said to Shauna, your story is so fascinating. Maybe we should write your story. And then meanwhile, I'm like, how am I going to do that? I'm raising 3 kids who were teenagers at that time. One of them was special needs. I was like, wait, how am I going to do this? But over the course of years, we were doing lots of little interviews. I would just bring a little tape recorder with me wherever I went. And then we would text a lot. And I taught her how to text and I got her an Apple phone, iPhone. So over this course of time, she has blossomed. She moved to Palm Springs. She walks 12 to 15 miles a day. Her mood walk therapy is what keeps her much more healed and balanced. She's opted not to take psychiatric meds, but she's the total, like everything that I've ever studied and known about the universe and synchronicities and innate sense of healing and just being yourself and the LGBTQIA stuff that she's taught me. It's all come together in her. And she's got the post-traumatic thriving like you wouldn't believe. And she's got 1 million views on Instagram, on videos, TikTok. It's unbelievable. She hadn't been on a plane in 17 years. Then I took her to Europe for 3 weeks. And
amazing.
I know it was amazing. We went to all the pride parades. And the whole point was because places like Hungary, they were having a lot of people try to cancel the pride parade. So I was like, maybe we should go make an appearance at Euro Pride in Lisbon and Paris Pride and start to talk about intersex and what that means and why it's just a human being like everybody else. And so we had this great trip, definitely had to manage the mental illness component, but she did great. She found a way to, no matter what was going on, she found a way to do her half marathon a day, no matter what.
That's
and
incredible.
I'd noticed it is. I would notice she was getting agitated and I'd be like, Shauna, you want to go take a little walk around the Eiffel Tower? And then she'd be gone for hours. And she has brought it all together, I would say. in a way that I never dreamed possible from that first moment in high school that I met, my high school sweetheart. I would have never known. I'm almost 60, that all of this would now make sense with my stepdaughter that was neurodivergent, all the trauma clients, all the research. It's all come together in this beautiful like bow with Shauna.
I love it. Oh my gosh. I love it. Oh my gosh. And we have the link to Shauna's book, right? We have that link. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's going to be underneath the video. For those of you listening in, it's going to be in the show notes. So make sure you check that out. You can actually read this story for yourself, which is incredible. And Kirsten, thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. Like, I'm a little bit in awe from this conversation. I have one question for you before we go. But first, before I ask that last question, if someone's listening and they really want to get to know more about you, they want to get to know more about this work, they want to understand more, where can people come hang out with you and find you?
So I would say my website, which is soulwisesolutions.com, SOULWISE solutions.com. That's where we have a lot of testimonials. The mayor of Palm Springs wrote something because she's friends with Shauna, like all of these different moments with Shauna, but also just about how to learn to have resilience and healing, and the different blogs we've written about trauma and whatever. It's so great to connect with people and to just give them one more resource to go, come on, keep going. We've all got this. We've all got different struggles, but we've got this. And there are always people on your side, and you never know when life is going to take a dramatic turn. I did not know when I had this feeling like I had to go to the grocery store that night. Shauna had no idea that was going to be her last night ever on the streets. Life can change on a dime in the best possible way.
Oh, that's so good. It's funny because my last question was going to be like, if you want people to take away one thing from today's conversation, what would that be? I think that was it, but let me know if someone's listening right now and they're like, that was so beautiful. That was so much that just came out. What is the one thing you hope people take away from our conversation today?
Just hope. There's always hope, and you just don't know. And you also don't know who's watching. Like Shauna could have been acting really a different way, but it was like she was so joyous and so full of like possibility. And she said, Doc, I was always curious. Every morning I woke up on the streets, I always knew something was going to work out for me. I just didn't know when. And I was always curious, what's the day going to bring? So to me, that's what I would leave people with. What is the day going to bring?
Oh, I know
you're giving me like chills now too.
Yes, I'm like, I have chills. It's so good. So good. Oh my God. Listen, thank you so much for hanging out with the girlfriends today, for sharing all of this information and these gorgeous, wonderful stories that remind us all, we're all in this together, really. And there is a lot.
We are. And thank you for your openness and your just beautiful spirit. It shines right through. So thank you.
Thank you so much.